Today's video is going to be my very own birth story. I am very excited to share my birth story and my birth experience with everybody. I do just want to put a little disclaimer out there before I get started that my birth, my labor, and my baby are unique to its own. I don't put up this video by any means for anyone to compare themselves to myself or my experience. Even my pregnancy, I do have my first, second, and third trimester recaps up. So I know that I stated on my Instagram and also in a couple of vlogs that I filmed before I gave birth that I was planning a home birth. It was also in my plans to have a water birth as well. I'm going to make a story time about my pregnancy journey from going to a women's center to then finding a midwife that I thought was going to be the one to birth my baby, and then shit hitting the fan and ended up going to a birth center and giving birth there 4 days after I met them. I know it sounds crazy, but honestly, everything works out best case scenario, and I am a true believer in that. And I had an amazing, wonderful birth at the birth center, and honestly, I would most likely consider going back to the birth center and not even doing a home birth just because it was that good. And I will explain a little bit more on why I think I felt more comfortable at the birth center in the end than I did throughout my whole pregnancy. I wanted as little intervention as possible, no medications. I wanted to feel everything, and I wanted to use my mind because I worked really hard on my mind in the past few maybe like 5 or 6 years because I was in a bad place at one point. And I think that I just found peace and I found comfort and security in my mind. And so I knew that that was how I wanted to cope through labor. Having just moved here in March, I got pregnant in May. I didn't really have any resources. I didn't even know where to find a midwife, if there was a midwife close to us. We didn't have our house yet. There was a lot of things that were up in the air. And so I started going to a women's center. I went to that women's center probably up to like 32 weeks, and I had found the midwife that I thought was going to birth my baby and was going to be magical and wonderful about 34 weeks, which 34 weeks is a really late time to start seeing a midwife. We clicked so well, and she not only wanted to work with me, but I also wanted to work with her, so it just felt like it was a perfect fit. She also had a midwife in training, and that made me feel more comfortable that there was going to be 2 midwives full hands-on at my home birth. Hello, editing Ash here. I am so tired, but I'm editing the video right now, and I started talking about my other midwife that I had in the home birth that I was supposed to have. That is what I originally wanted, but I just wanted to put this in here because I did cut a big chunk of it out. That's not really what I want to add into my birth story video. I want it to be positive and about my experience because it was wonderful. So maybe I will make a different video, like a story time or something like that about my experience and about that time in my pregnancy journey. But I just don't want that in this video, you know? I got a sleepy baby. So that led me to the wonderful birth center of Boulder at my 38th week mark of pregnancy, and I went into labor at 38 weeks and 3 days. And let me tell you, they were wonderful. I'm going to talk more about it in the video. But from the moment I met them, it was even just different. Like, I thought I knew with the midwife that I had met previously that this is the one, this sounds great. You will definitely know who you can trust and who is going to be the one that's going to deliver your baby. So my biggest advice for expecting mothers is if you're going to do a home birth, if you're going to even go to a birth center, make sure that you interview with multiple midwives before you pick a home birth midwife, or multiple midwives in the birth center, just to make sure, because in a birth center, the person delivering your baby isn't necessarily the person that you're seeing at every single appointment. You might see someone different at every single appointment. It just depends on who is on call whenever you go into labor. And luckily for me, the person that I had seen at 38 weeks was the midwife on call, and she was the midwife at the center who helped deliver my precious baby. Like I said, I believe that everything manifests best case scenario just the way it's supposed to. So now we get into the juicy details of my labor. So around 5 p.m. on January 15th, 2021, I began feeling active labor contractions. The way that I knew that they were not Braxton Hicks contractions anymore and that they were real labor contractions was whenever I had Braxton Hicks contractions, I had the tightening in my abdominal, in my belly. I would either lay down, do some deep breathing, or drink some water, and they would go away. But after about 30 minutes of that, I realized that, oh, these are not Braxton Hicks because these have a mind of their own. And as soon as I realized that it was not Braxton Hicks contractions, I instantly started moving. I was bouncing on my yoga ball, and then eventually I moved to my hands and knees. And I even like put like my forearms on my yoga ball and was moving my hips around, and that really helped as well. But at this point, they weren't super painful at all. And it was a lot of pressure in my back, which was also different from the Braxton Hicks contractions. So about 30 to 40 minutes after I had been getting a little bit more active on the ball and on my hands and knees, I started tracking my contractions. And this little process that I was doing with bouncing on the ball and doing the hands and knees and tracking my contractions lasted about 2 hours. And after I had been pretty consistent for 2 hours, I think it was like 5 to 7 minutes apart and about 1 to 3 minutes-ish long. They were very sporadic in the beginning, and that is completely normal. I called the midwife around 7 p.m. and let her know what was going on. At this point, I had been told that as a first-time mother, your body really doesn't know what to do when labor starts, so it could take anywhere between 24 to 48 hours for you to actually have your baby. And so I wasn't really under the impression that, hey, like I'm really about to have a baby right now. It was just kind of like preparing and prepping my body. That was what I felt like was going on, which was what was going on, but it was happening way more rapidly than what I thought. So when I called the midwife and told her what was going on, she informed me that this sounded like pre-labor and that active labor might be starting really soon, and we would probably be seeing her that night. And I was like, what? Like that night? It was already 7 p.m. and I was just, whenever she said that, I was shook. And I feel like something shifted inside of me, like, okay, we're really about to have this baby. And I told Tyler, and he was like, tonight? Like you just started having contractions. Like, what do you mean tonight? And I was like, I don't know, but be prepared. And I just went upstairs at that point. Like I said, I had been downstairs just like watching TV casually. And after she told me that she might be seeing me tonight, like we might have a baby, I went into this mom zone labor mode. The midwife also told me to call her again if, number one, I felt like I couldn't handle it and I needed to come in, or to call her whenever my contractions became more consistent and they were about 2 to 3 minutes apart and more like 1 to 2 minutes long. So at this point, I was just walking around upstairs, going into his nursery, and when a contraction would come, I would get on my hands and knees. This position proved to be not only the most productive for my labor and the most progressive, but the most comfortable, and it made me feel really safe. I would just breathe through the waves in my hands and knees, swaying my hips, and whenever the wave was over, I would continue just like walking around. And I stayed active my entire labor. So around 11:30 p.m., things were starting to feel a little bit more intense and a little bit more crampy for sure. I was becoming more vocal, and contractions were about 2 to 3 minutes apart at this point. And so about 30 minutes after my contractions being really consistent at 2 to 3 minutes apart, I felt called to call and update my midwife. Called her and she was super positive. She told me to continue laboring at home, that everything sounded like, it was transitioning into that active labor, and that I could labor at home until I felt like I was too uncomfortable, until I felt like I needed a little bit more support, or until I lost my mucus plug. And she told me to just call her back with any other updates or if I was coming in or whatever I decided, which honestly felt really good that I was in control of my labor and my delivery from the start of it till the end of it. That in itself is, I feel like, why I really wanted to have a home birth, and it just made me feel safe. To be in control of such a life-changing and intense experience made all of the difference for me. So around 12:15, I ended up losing my mucus plug, which was crazy. Didn't hurt or anything, but it was just shocking. Losing my mucus plug to me was like, okay, things are even getting taken to the next step. At that point, I feel, was when things really changed for me and I became engulfed in the labor itself, and like nothing else mattered. I had like tunnel vision. Contractions were closer together and getting more intense. I called my midwife in between contractions because I couldn't really talk at this point. And she said that that was great. She was still positive, and she said that we should probably plan on heading to the birth center within the next hour or two because we had a 40-minute drive to the birth center. And I feel like she said that the hour or two window because normally in a first-time mother, like I said, labor takes a while. I was just focusing on my breath and on a couple mantras that really helped me get through. A couple mantras that really helped me during labor was, number one, I would just say down, 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 move down, down, down. And I feel like that told my brain, my body, my baby to move down, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. I wanted things to keep progressing and not to stall or go backwards. also recited that these waves cannot be stronger than me because they are a part of me. And that also really helped just to reassure me that this whole process is more or less above me. I didn't have to think fearful or worrisome thoughts because I knew and I trusted that my baby knew what he was doing, my body knew what it was doing, and all I had to do was breathe. So I was breathing and reciting these mantras for about an hour, give or take, and it felt like things were slowly shifting into something different. Not rapidly and not at like a fearful rate, but slowly but surely I felt like he was moving down. I was feeling more pressure on my back, and it was like a more constant pressure instead of these in the surges of the contractions. Just want to mention that I had all back labor. I didn't feel any tightness or anything in my front of my stomach like Braxton Hicks and stuff. In the beginning, when I first started feeling contractions, I did have some contractions in the front, but it moved to the back and stayed in the back throughout the rest of my labor after that. So like I said, after about an hour or so, once I started feeling things change again, I called Tyler into the room and I was like, okay, we need to get ready to go to the birth center. I think things are happening. I think that we're getting close. I don't know how close, but I think that I'm ready to head there. Like I said, it's 40 minutes away, so I was giving myself time. Once I told him, okay, I'm ready to go, I feel like I was ready to go right that second, and I was very patient. I wasn't trying to rush him or anything, but I was like, oh my God, this is taking forever. Like, I'm just ready to be there, which being in the car was no better. I actually think being in the car was the worst part of my labor. Like I said before, I really enjoyed being on hands and knees. It made me feel safe. It helped me feel like I was progressing, and it was the best way to cope. I was feeling a lot of pressure, I feel like, in my ribs and my upper back, which is a given. I was having contractions. I got a lot of relief by being on my hands and knees. And so not being able to be on my hands and knees in a 40-minute car ride with contractions about 1 to 3 minutes apart was intense. Contractions were strong and they were steady and they were right on time every time, the whole car ride. Once we arrived at the birth center, I think I walked in and I said something like, I totally overestimated myself, like, this is intense. And she told me, no, labor is hard, labor is rough, you're doing great. And she told me that if I wanted to get into the birth tub, I could. She knew that that was something that I really wanted. And I was like, yep, I'm doing it. So I got undressed, I got into the tub. Honestly, it felt like heaven. Like, if you have the option and you feel called to, I highly recommend having water available at your birth. Because I'm not gonna lie, it took my pain from about a 9 to a 7. Made me be able to think clear. I was able to connect back to my breath, recenter, refocus. And I think that that's something that really helped me get through transition and through pushing, was to be able to reset in the water and labor in the water for a little bit. Once I was in the water, she asked if she could check to see how far along I was, since I had just got there, so we could kind of gauge how the rest of the evening was gonna go and when baby would possibly be here. After I was comfortable in the water, she checked my cervix in between contractions. And to our surprise, I was already 8 to 9 centimeters dilated, which honestly blew my mind. And I was like, that is why I felt like I overestimated myself. I was literally on the border of transition in the car. My midwife was shocked that I had progressed so quickly since 5 p.m. I was shocked. Tyler was shocked. She told me that we would be seeing our baby in a few hours. And again, I just feel like that even put me in the zone even more than I was already in the zone. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have this baby soon. I am strong. I trust my body. I trust my baby. I trust our birth. I continued laboring in the tub for about an hour or so. At that point, it was like 3 or 3:30 a.m. and I wasn't tired at all. Tyler was wide awake. Like, I was so shocked. But I mean, it's so invigorating to know that you're about to bring a baby into this world. She asked if she could check my cervix again, because you don't want to push until you are fully dilated and your cervix is fully softened. And she checked me and I was at a full 10. Cervix was fully softened. Everything was ready to go. So after she checked me, I think I had a couple more contractions, and she's like, okay, I feel good about you starting to push. If you feel called and you feel like your body is ready, you can push with your next contraction. And I'm not gonna lie, I felt a little nervous to push. I was like, okay, like, this is even the next step. Like, we're getting so close to meeting my baby. And I never said, like, I can't do this, because I never felt like I couldn't do this, but I did question myself, like, are you ready? Can you have this baby? Like I said, I knew in my heart and my soul that my body was completely capable and that my baby knew exactly what he was doing. But it's scary. There's a moment where you're like, oh shit, I'm about to become a mother. And so I had felt a little bit of pressure and a little bit of urges to push before she checked me and told me that I was good to push. But I think that once I knew, like, okay, everything's fully open, I can go with that urge, I felt comfortable. And so the next contraction, I started pushing. And I think by the third contraction, I pushed and my water broke, which my water breaking wasn't as crazy as what I had expected it to be. I was in the water, but I just felt like a pop and then a gush of even warmer water, which the water I think was like 98 degrees in the tub. And I felt like that warm water. And I was like, wow, like I'm about to have this baby. And so I did the pushing with contractions for about 30 or 45 minutes. And then she said that she could feel his head. It was definitely coming down. I wanted to have fresh, clean water and also warmer water for whenever I gave birth. So I got out so that we could refill the tub and clean it out and everything. And she told me to keep things progressing as they were. I should try the stool. I hated the stool. It was terrible. I'm not saying that to scare anybody. I feel like that was just my case and my experience. But it's like this little stool that sits like yay high off the ground and has a hole in it. And you just sit there with your legs open and you push with your contractions. Like I said, the water really helped me. So I feel like whenever I was out of the tub and having contractions and pushing, it was a lot more intense. And I had just been really comfortable on hands and knees. Like even in the tub, I had washcloths underneath my knees and I was on the edge of the tub. That's how I was laboring. And then whenever I would have a contraction, I would put my hands down in the tub, but I was still on my hands and knees. So squatting on the stool was not comfortable for me, but I did it. I think I lasted like 15 minutes. And then I was like, I need to get on the bed. And I don't know why I didn't get back in the birth tub, but I'm glad that I didn't because you'll hear in a second why. On the bed and I was on my hands and knees pushing. This lasted about 40 minutes until he crowned. And then I think that I pushed for maybe like 7 to 10 times and his head came out. Honestly, crowning and the ring of fire wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I really just listened to my body and pushed with my urges and kind of listened to my baby. I was really trying to tune in, get messages, and be synced with the whole process. When I pushed his head out a couple more times and then they were like, we have to flip you over. So they flipped me over, they pushed my knees to my chest, twisted him a couple of times, and then Tyler caught him and he was born at 6:18 a.m. on January 16th, 2021. He was 7 pounds, 9 ounces, and 20.5 inches. So he's a tall boy. He was so healthy. They did have to give him a couple breaths with this little breath machine, but he started breathing right away and I laid him right on my chest. It was the best feeling I had ever felt in my entire life. He latched right away. His eyes were open. He was looking at Tyler, looking at me. It was honestly such a beautiful moment. The most beautiful moment of my life, if I'm being honest. Never understood the way that people talked about labor and birth. I mean, I was like, yeah, they're kids being born, but like, what does it actually feel like? And I'm so grateful that I was able to experience that because it is total bliss, total happiness, so much love pouring out of my heart. And I am such a loving person. Like I'm a Pisces. If you don't believe in that, like I am just a very empathic and loving person. I'm very kind and genuine and I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but I take pride in being a loving and kind person. I know that I'm not perfect, but I had never felt more love in my heart than I did when my son was born. If you know me, you know that's a lot. I did have some bleeding after birth, and while I was nursing him and stuff, they stabbed me a couple times. It's crazy the way that they stab you with that needle. They gave me a couple shots of Pitocin, and I eventually started bleeding at a more normal rate. My placenta did rupture a little bit and part of the top was like open a little bit, and so they said that that was probably why I had the bleeding. The bleeding did taper down to the more normal level. After we had like 30 to 45 minutes of skin to skin and him latching, I handed him over to Tyler and Tyler was able to hold him. And that was just beautiful. They ran me a fresh bath and I got in and they put all of these herbs and Epsom salts in there. It smelled so good. It was so relaxing. I was so tired after I gave birth. I had never been so tired in my life. And I think it had to do with not only being in labor for 12 hours, 13 hours, but also that I hadn't slept since like I was getting up at like 4 a.m., 3 a.m. the end of my pregnancy. So I think I got up at 3 a.m. on the 15th and it was like 6 a.m. on the 16th. So it was over 24 hours since I had slept. slept. And so I just kind of laid back in the tub and closed my eyes a little bit. Cooper actually got weighed and measured and all of that whenever I was in the tub, and then they brought him to me, and I'll insert some pictures of our first time holding him and him latching, and also him in the tub with me, which was such a beautiful experience. Like, him being in the water with me, he was so calm. After my bath, they made me a meal of these postpartum oats and some nuts. I actually had aversions and nausea after I gave birth, and it wasn't anything intense, but I think that I was just so tired and I hadn't eaten in like 10 hours that my body just didn't want or need food. But I did have like 3 big glasses of their electrolyte water. I thought I was gonna be like starving, ravenous after labor, but that wasn't the case. Nice to replenish my body with that water, and I did have a few nuts. And so we stayed there for probably about 4 hours. We left the birth center around like 11:30, which was also so amazing. It was really nice to be able to go home right away and be in our own bed, use our own bathroom, and just to feel safe and secure and comfortable after such a life-changing experience. So I do want to mention that the reason why I feel like if I had another baby, or if I have another baby, that I will go to the birth center instead of doing the home birth like I wanted, was because the aftercare that I received was so pristine. They were so attentive to my needs and how I was feeling, as well as how baby was feeling and baby's needs, also dad's needs. They were checking in on him. They ran me that beautiful bath, and they had the most amazing sitz bath and herbs. So the meal that they made me after and the electrolyte water was just amazing. They were in and out anytime that we needed help. They were there anytime that we needed help, but they also gave us our space and allowed us to have those first moments with our baby without shoving things in our face and pricking and poking us and asking us questions. And that meant a lot to me. Like I said, I felt like I was in control from the time I went into labor until after I had him. Truly the most life-changing, transformative experience I have been through yet. I am so grateful that I was able to have a non-medicated labor, that I didn't tear, and that my baby was born healthy. I already look back and he's like 10 pounds now, like he's gained some weight, and he's got his little personality, and I'm like, where did my little newborn go? Still a newborn, I think, until after they're 2 months old. So I think I'm going to wrap up this video here. I appreciate you listening to my story. This is truly my favorite season of life yet. I love being Cooper's mom and wouldn't want it any other way. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post our postpartum, our newborn must-have, my postpartum must-haves, and I also plan to do his 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and so on updates so that I have those to look back on as well. So if you feel called to, I post a lot of daily updates and more about my daily life on my Instagram, so follow me on there. If you are an expecting mother or you're looking to get pregnant, wish you the best. I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.